So hello, Omar and Jeremy. I'm so happy that Breezeway and Guesty could get together to review the results of our recent survey initiatives and discuss and summarize how these results predict the future of travel. We have both of you presenting on your own survey findings and then touching on some various discussion points. So without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to Omer Rabin, Guesty's Managing Director of the Americas.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. So let me actually just share my slides here. That's always the most fun part of any kind of Zoom meeting. So what we want to go over today is really operating under the new circumstances. What is the new normal? What are the new personas that we are actually trying to serve as part of the new normal? And what we are seeing as trends of people really adjusting to it. So just a little bit about Guesty as a whole, just to let everybody know who we are. The Guesty platform, as you see on the screen, is an end-to-end solution that simplifies the complex operational needs of property management companies all over. In the big scheme of things, we're trying to democratize the hospitality, allow every person in the world to create their own experiences and their own brand. And so we want to automate and streamline all the manual processes and all the repeatable processes so that our customers, and we have thousands of those in 80 different markets, can really focus on what matters, understanding their market, focus on guest experience, acquire the right inventory, etc. Because we collect all the information from all those thousands of customers in 80 different countries, both direct booking and booking through OTAs and websites, we're really able to see a lot of data. And then we also surveyed many of them. We had hundreds of property managers reply to our survey in the midst of the pandemic to really understand how the market is changing. We see our success is really dependent on the success of the host, which is why we're very much in tune to that and also have a lot of resources to really try and guide people in all different countries how to weather the storm. So let's just start by saying that COVID-19 really resulted in a new travel personas. Some of them are here to stay, maybe even forever. Some of them were with us in March and April and really drove the market and really allowed property managers all over the world to not have to go through a complete standstill. The first one were displaced and stranded travelers, people who went on a nice trip at the end of February or the beginning of March, and suddenly the world came to a stop and they are somewhere and need a solution. The other ones are digital nomads, people who really care about Wi-Fi above all, and maybe a nice view to wake up to. And they're basically saying, why would I pay my rent in the city center where everybody is in a lockdown or a shelter in place? I much rather travel and spend a month or two in different locations and work remotely. The big persona that came out of this pandemic is the cityscapers. Those are the people who live in a city. Maybe they have a partner, maybe they even have 2 kids or 3 kids or 1 kid or just a very cute dog. And they really want to head into rural areas and try to work remotely from there. Instead of being in a shoebox type of apartment with their partner and kids and maybe an animal, move to the mountains, be there, work and relax in those areas. That really gave a great boost to the rural and suburban areas over the urban areas that were much more heavily hit during the pandemic. Then we also had all the people who are in quarantine, people who wanted to go out and visit their families, but in order to not actually put their family and loved ones at risk, chose to actually spend 14 days in quarantine close to their location. That is a very interesting market because the short-term rental industry, since forever, was actually made of 3 to 5 day stays. The business travelers came for 5 days. The people who are weekend travelers did 3 to 4 days. And now we actually see the average stay going way up to about 9, 10 days, sometimes even more, because of those people who are staying 14 days for quarantine or people who are looking for midterm stays of 30 or 60 days away from their city, from their actual homes. And as you can see, there's also a lot of business workers and families. That really led to a few patterns. The first one is the idea of extended stay. It kind of feels now, and maybe a lot of the people listening to us can identify or that resonates with them, there isn't really a short-term rental market and a long-term or a mid-term. It's sort of a flexible rental type of market. Everything that is not your primary home or a hotel is part of that industry, and extended stay is a big part of that. There's a lot of expectation around outdoor space. People want to come, but they also want to have the ability to have a garden or a balcony to get some fresh air without having to see and interact with other people. Drive to destinations are pretty big right now. People don't feel comfortable yet going on airplanes. They do feel comfortable getting into their car and traveling between 2 and 5 hours. And domestic travel is really what's driving the industry, and we'll show some of the metrics in a second. But we barely see any international travel right now. It's only out of necessity. Domestic travel is really driving the market. Another thing that allows short-term rental to really thrive, because people feel comfortable staying in another house and not a hotel, especially in a place where they know the language and know the culture. Here are just a few things that we have seen in our state of the short-term rental report that you can find, as you can see, on our website. 60%, which means the majority of the hundreds of hosts that we interviewed, and again, we assume it's the 1,000 that we're serving in general, reported that they follow the much more stringent cleaning protocols in light of COVID-19. And by the way, let me tell you, the other 40% are either doing it wrong or adjusted since then. But a lot of people are really leaving hours now to clean the house, doing a lot of mid-stay cleanings if the guest is interested in that, leaving other sets of sheets, and a lot of other things, really being able to put attention to detail. And we'll talk what that means. In terms of the terms, a lot of them had to change their terms in order to really get more booking and drive up their occupancy rate, which is the most important metric today. Just to put a comparison, a lot of our customers reported about 30% occupancy back in April, now seeing numbers closer to 65 or 70%. A lot of that is because 22% of them, almost 1 in 4, introduced flexible cancellation policy. That's on top of those that had flexible cancellation policy before. Even those who had the most strict cancellation policy had to adjust. The reason is people just don't know. I like to say that advanced planning is very 2019. 2020 is all about flexible cancellation policy. And then some of them had to, unfortunately, reduce the daily rates, especially for bookings that are not within the next week or two. Reason is, again, a lot of supply and not as much demand right now compared to last year. Lastly, 38% diversify their business model and include extended stays, which actually means also adjusting their entire model. So it's also, how do I check in and out in a stay of a month or more? How do I create a working room for people to work remotely? 38%, again, more than a third, did not have extended stay before and are forced to that right now. And the peace of mind of having occupancy for the entire month is the reason that they are doing that. Really quickly, that really created a shift in the entire market. So in terms of Airbnbs, you can see on the screen now, there's a lot more hosts that are accepting that. And we think that the monthly stays is part of the reason that Airbnb was able to really see a spike in June and July and go back to the levels that they knew in 2019. You will not stay probably in a hotel for a whole month. You will find a house that you like and do that. And for us at Guesty, we also introduced the idea of extended stays to really support many customers that are looking to have guests staying for 30, 60, or 90 days. And there's a lot of guides that you can find, again, on our site on how to do that, how to price smartly for the extended stay, how to automate the guest communication. So during their stay, they're able to stay in touch with you, but they don't feel like you're being overbearing, asking them every 2 days how they're doing when they're in your house for 30 days. How to centralize all the bookings and also offer rental agreements to those that are staying longer stays. So you really check all the boxes and not just rely on OTAs that, you know, in their creation, in their essence, are more built for the 1 week or 2 week max. A little bit about things that we have seen that are very important in guest communication. Communication is key. At time that people don't have the predictability in their life that they want, they really try and get this predictability from the communication with the host. They put their trust in you, and they put the health of their families in your hands by coming to your home. And so communication is key. We really encourage people to do increased communication about the COVID-19. What stage of reopening is in the region? What does that mean? What do you know from other guests? Communicating that is key to getting the guests to be much more comfortable. Highlighting the cleaning procedures is a very, very big part. tell them what you're doing. Don't just assume that they think that you are being very careful about that. Tell them exactly what are the measures that you put in place. Publicize the in-property amenities that keep guests occupied. Netflix, Hulu, more wine in the house so that people can use that. Some guides about which restaurants in the area are delivering or doing takeaway. Having a lot of board games. All those things were a nice to have, but actually became a must have during the pandemic. And you want to publicize that in your listing and also in your communication and encourage them to take use of those. Note your flexible cancellation policies, maybe even put things like cancellation policy and the cleaning in the subject, in the title of the listing through the different channels. Offer contact-free stay. That's a very, very big thing. A lot of families want to say, I want to be able to go into my car in my house and into my vacation rental home that I'm staying for the next 30 days without seeing any other soul. So offering this contact-free through a lot of technology partners, we have them all on our Guesty marketplace, is a very big thing. And we highly recommend, again, mentioning that during the booking process and even put that very visibly on the listing. Provide discounts or coupons for future stay. And that's key. We have seen huge spike in direct booking for our customers. The reason for that is those customers that are now staying probably leave about 2 or 3 hours away. And if they like your location, they're going to optimize for safety and come back to the same house a month or two later. Being able to say at the end of a stay with us again. We'd love to have you. You now know exactly the process. It's safe. It's known. Here is 5 or 10 or even 20% off your next stay of 2 weeks or more is huge. And it helped a lot of our customers drive direct booking percentage from 5 or 8% to over 30, which is amazing. And lastly, we now offer integration with WhatsApp, which we found very, very interesting as a way for your customers to have some kind of a constant communication with you on the go. Again, you can find a lot of information in our info center, things about how to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. We track the situation and we'll let you know how to stay informed about what's going on, how to price your properties appropriately, and address the new travelers' personas. I'm going to take just 2 more minutes, last minute, to share more of the information. So, Jeremy, you and I can discuss it after. We have seen that specifically in May and June, most of the bookings are bookings for the next week, and after that for the next 30 days, meaning most people wake up on a Tuesday or a Wednesday and say, I want to just, spend the weekend up in the mountains, and they're looking for booking. No longer a 2 months or a 3 months window. Most of the bookings are being done in the week before moving in, especially those for the weekend or 1 week stay, but even the longer ones. The second one is booking within 30 days. That means that bookings that are being done 31 days and more are almost non-existent in our system. And again, we're tracking thousands of customers in 80 different countries. Italy is one of the places that really continue to show the biggest spike. Again, their starting point when you look at April is probably one of the lowest, which really helps that. But I guess what we can see is a trend here that the countries that were hurt the most at the beginning are the quickest now to recover. Maybe a good message around the US that is being hit very heavily right now. And as I said, property management companies are adapting to the new normal. Most of them have adjusted their marketing, offering different type of stay and incorporating extended stays as well. And so the market is very agile. Again, one of the reasons that we think short-term rental properties are weathering the storm much better than hotels, this agility, this ability to change all the processes from marketing to pricing to the extended stays point. And lastly, some signs around optimism, though the second wave resulted in hesitancy to commit, which means we've seen an increase in June, a little bit more of a plateau in July, which has the fact that we continue to see increased reservations in places like the USA in 28%, Canada saw a huge increase of over 200% in number of reservation and 94% in the price per reservation. A lot of that is because the policy of shelter in place was there before. And even in Europe, UK is leading the chart in really seeing increase of 18% month over month between June and May. And you can see all the information here. Australia is also doing pretty well. The one thing that is very interesting is the holiday data. We have seen that the holidays that are behind us, like for example, July 4th, actually saw an increase of bookings. So more people stayed in short-term rental properties in 2020 compared to 2019, but advanced reservations are slow. Again, people are just don't believing in advanced planning. What that tells us is that probably we're going to see a lot of last-minute booking for Christmas and New Year's. And so looking at all the data, we at Guesty believe that we're going to see holiday season that is stronger than 2019, but those reservations are really going to flow in October or November. So you need to have a lot of patience and a lot of nerves and track the data so you can price appropriately and make sure that you have the right cancellation terms. But that's just a little bit about holiday data. Again, I'm happy to answer any question based on the breadth of data that we have at Guesty. This is my direct email. Please share any kind of question with me. And that's just a little bit about what we have seen. Again, you can download the full report on our website at guesty.com. And with that, let me stop the sharing and get back to you, Jeremy.
Fantastic. That was great.
Thank you. Now I'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys are seeing. Is that anywhere close to what we are seeing, or are you seeing a whole different world?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think it's really interesting, as part of the transition here, as I pull my slides up, it's fascinating how, when you think about that compressed booking window and really the last minute stays, I think there's a lot of our mutual clients who have not made that adjustment yet to how difficult that will continue to be for your operation. Where when you can plan 60 days, 30 days ahead, you understand exactly what you're going to need to staff up to maintain that operation, to maintain the type of experience you want. When that becomes even more fluid, and we'll talk about some of the operational challenges here, I think that's just going to exponentially increase some of the work that our mutual clients have to do. It's exciting, but that's a change when you start thinking about really last minute bookings in the vacation rental space and people being ready for that. So definitely matches up, especially with the traveler persona, as we'll dig in. And then I'm going to make sure to save some time afterwards so that the two of us can have a discussion about not just what happens over the next couple of months, but really going into 2021. How do these changes, hopefully we will get, especially here in the States, but everywhere across the world, we'll get this pandemic under control. We'll get past this, but what are going to be the lasting effects to the travel industry over the next couple of years? So I'm going to go through mine with some speed and make sure we've got time for that discussion. So a little bit about myself and about Breezeway, just to kick things off. I'm Jeremy Gall. I'm the founder of Breezeway. I started this company a few years ago based on my experience at Flipkey and TripAdvisor. I'd founded Flipkey in 2006, vacation rental marketplace. We'd worked with thousands of property managers and about 500,000 properties around the world. And what I saw was that the operational challenges of the business were going to get harder and harder. And that if you could deliver in partnership with companies like Guesty, in partnership with the property management software system, you could deliver really robust service optimization software, the same sort of software that hotels use to manage their service interactions. You could really help property managers and hosts and professional operators streamline the information and the process that they have to do to get these properties prepared in a really quality way. So what do we mean by property care and service and operations? We mean every time you're touching that property, from cleaning to inspection to preventative maintenance, ongoing maintenance, in-stay service requests, how you communicate that and how you manage that to deliver really an exceptional experience to the guest, which is what they expect. And speaking of guest expectations, that new traveler persona that Omer was talking about really is playing deeply into the operational challenges of the business. And what it means is that property managers and hosts need to navigate some really new demands for that traveler. They're much more concerned about the cleanliness and safety of the unit and of the property and home, which we'll talk about. And it means that the host and manager needs to really instill confidence in that traveler to make sure that the property is well prepared. And I think that building of trust boils down to one word, and this has been a theme in the vacation rental industry for many years, but the concept of predictability, right? We want as consumers to have a predictable experience with the goods that we buy, the services that we interact with, the homes that we stay with when we go on vacation. We saw this at Flipkey when we started this, and that was all about guest reviews and adding some level of predictability. What am I going to get? What is this home going to be like when I get there, when I've never stayed with this host or this property manager before? And those guest reviews were critical. And we've seen that grow across all the OTAs over the last 15 years. But this concept of quality now with COVID-19 has really just sort of pushed that dynamic forward even more. How predictable is this experience? How clean and safe am I going to feel in the unit? And so two things that we're going to talk about today. First that I wanted to bring up was, based on working with thousands of managers and looking at their process, we looked through all of that information and distilled and created the new Vacation Rental Clean, this new cleaning guide for property managers and hosts to use to make sure that they're going through and effectively looking at and improving their process to make sure that they're hitting everything that they should as they get their properties prepared. And this is available, and we found a lot of folks who found this really helpful to improve their business. This is part of that new traveler demand. Omer was talking about it. We're going to talk about it some more and how that interplays into the business. So the other part, and we'll focus most of our attention for our piece of the presentation here on this, which is we conducted a property operations survey, and we really focused, instead of asking managers and hosts about their business broadly, we really dug in just on the operational piece of the business. What are they seeing? What changes are they making? What are they hearing from guests? How do they interpret what that traveler persona is, which I think is really interesting. And so we'll go through and talk a little bit about this. We surveyed 200 professional managers, pretty good spread geographically. We've got clients in 20 countries. We heard from many of them, heavily in the United States, but lots of different folks with a good variety of portfolios. So very representative of what's happening in the market. And in a nutshell, this is what we saw, which is a continuation of this exact discussion, right? Which is a big shift in guest expectations and the operational professionalism that's necessary to meet them. So we're going to talk about guest expectations and behaviors, how we think those have changed, how property managers are changing the way they think about cleanliness and sanitation at the property. Digging in a little bit about safety and communication, and then quality assurance and preventative maintenance, and the technology and tools and how managers and hosts are looking at those tools to help them get their job done. And we'll use this as a forum to sort of speak about that guest persona and the new traveler demands throughout. So first on guest expectations and behavior. So there were two questions here, which are, what do managers think is happening with guest expectations? So not surprising that the professional operators we surveyed, 97% of them felt that guests were going to be much more concerned about cleanliness and safety, and that their approach to cleanliness and safety had changed during COVID-19. 62% thinking it had significantly changed, which is not a surprise, right? But what's really interesting is a super majority of managers believing that cleanliness and safety is the most important factor now, more important than price, more important than location and amenities. It doesn't mean, and this is where I think it's interesting, right? Like the way that we look at the world is expectations for service, anything, consumer experience, they're always going up. So as Omer was talking about, right, like the amenities, the expectations for amenities don't go down. That doesn't mean that because you're really concerned about cleanliness, you're no longer concerned about board games and fresh coffee and a coffee pot that's really clean and works in the morning, or the space you're going to have. It's just additive. It's another layer on top of all the other expectations again. And so I think what that means is that for managers, the job gets harder. They're not, the booking factor of price and location are still so important. It's just you layered on cleanliness as another one on top of that, which I think is really, really interesting. And as you think about cleanliness and safety during COVID-19 and how this has changed, what's very interesting is, particularly, we saw this in the United States, and I think Italy and Europe has seen this as well. Spain has seen this. As soon as the booking window opened, and I think, Omer, I can talk about this later as well, but as soon as that booking window opened, there was so much pent-up demand for travel and for people to get out of their homes that I think a lot of managers we surveyed were surprised to get so many online bookings. They were surprised that people weren't calling them on the phone and asking them about their cleaning protocols. There was just so much demand, and people were like, yes, I want to book. I'm booking right now. I want to leave. But it's going to be very interesting to see how that wave continues. As we move into this new traveler persona, how much of that is there? As this continued uncertainty plays out, and it plays out month over month, and we go through the major holiday season of the summer in most markets, what happens next? And what happens at the holiday season? What happens in January next year in this period of uncertainty? And now I've got a little bit more time to plan. I wasn't waiting for things to open up and booking right away. I've got a little bit more time to plan. How are we going to see those questions change over the next year? Hold on. I don't want to annotate. Just want to move my slide. Next, let's talk about cleanliness and sanitation. So almost everyone, and if they didn't make any changes when we surveyed them in April and May, I promise you they have now. But almost everyone was planning to make changes to their housekeeping programs following COVID-19. The interesting piece that we saw here with our client base is that those changes ranged from very small tweaks to a few larger operational changes. But for the most part, which is so great about this industry, that so many of the managers and hosts are really dedicated to cleanliness already. So yes, they were making tweaks and trying to dial in their process a little more, but most of the folks we talk to, they're not changing holistically everything they're doing. They're very dedicated to how these properties are cleaned and prepared already. Now they're just tweaking it. Maybe they're adding different chemicals. They're adding more time because they're touching high touch surfaces. Definitely a theme that we saw, extending the amount of time that's necessary for folks to be able to clean the property. And another thing we saw is more and more folks customizing their checklists for housekeeping based on the property. So for each property, and you're thinking about how do I prepare a portfolio of unique properties to a similar brand standard, and how do I do it efficiently and make sure that everything is done? Picture the contrast between how that's done in a vacation home versus a hotel room. That hotel room looks exactly the same. Those cleaners are trained. They know the waste paper basket goes right to the left of the desk, and it goes that way in every single unit. And it's so easily predictable. When you have 50 or hundreds of different units and homes where everything is different, trying to make sure that every one of those details is captured, or that bathtub that has a little bit of a tricky piece to it actually gets cleaned and drained correctly by your cleaning staff or your third-party service provider. It is an incredibly difficult challenge. And when the stakes are higher, it becomes even more necessary to dial in and customize those housekeeping checklists. And we saw a lot of that over the summer. Safety and communication. This is one that's incredibly fascinating to me because safety is such a broad and loaded word, right? It's as loaded as the word quality, which is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. But safety is such a big word when it comes to property management and property care. What we saw during COVID-19 is the line between safety and cleanliness becoming very blurred together, which makes all sense in the world, right? You're very concerned about the health of your staff, the health of your guests, the health of your owners at the property, and that's their safety, that's their life safety, to make sure that they can remain, that they're interacting with a very well sanitized and clean property, especially in light of COVID-19. But safety is bigger than that, right? Safety is about how that property is prepared. If we'd been having this conversation in 2019, this time last year, we would be talking about smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors at the properties and how well they're tested. Are they even there? How are you sure that they're there? And what are you doing for routine preventative maintenance on the safety side of the spectrum? And I believe we will get back there where we will be talking about both. But it's very clear that safety now is part of cleanliness, and property managers are taking active steps to make sure that their guests and owners know exactly what they're doing to make sure that they have a safe experience at the property. I think this was the biggest shift when we think operationally, and you compare and contrast this with my comments on the last slide. This is really the biggest shift that we saw, which is because of COVID-19, most managers were making 5 to 10% shifts in the way that they actually cleaned properties, and 100% shifts in the way that they market and speak to how they clean those properties. 100% shift in how they communicate to that. Getting on, I believe it was on an earlier webinar with Guesty, actually, where we talked about the fact that property managers were starting to show images of their cleaning protocols or their cleaning checklist and add that image to the back of the property listing that they were pushing to the OTAs. This is unheard of, right? This is totally unheard of, that you would take your cleaning measures or how you're changing linens and add those images to your listing on Airbnb and Booking.com so that you could then show that to prospective guests. And that's the climate that we were in, with many folks changing the way they communicate with that. Quality assurance and preventative maintenance. This is huge. And I think one of the things we saw that's very interesting, 55% of managers and hosts independently inspecting every property prior to guest arrival. I think the other 45% here, they certainly do that. They probably don't do it on every unit, on every turn, but more and more that's becoming necessary, and more folks are actually doing that. With 85% planning to actively change their safety and maintenance protocols. The thing is here is that quality assurance is such a big piece of the puzzle when the stakes have become higher, right? And how you verify the work in the field becomes critical to ensuring that you're actually going to meet those standards. What we saw over the past couple of months is that in the past, this was very important to hosts and managers to make sure they were keeping up their brand standard for guests or for when an owner came to the property. They certainly didn't want something to be, out of place and what have you. But now it's not just for the guests, it's also for their staff. They want to make sure that there's the right quality assurance and preventative maintenance in place to make sure that their staff is safe, and that staff feels safe, and third-party service cleaners and providers feel safe interacting with that property. It's really important. I think we talk about it here as I sort of whip through these quickly, but when it comes to technology and tools, we have 50%, nearly 50% of respondents talking about that operations and focusing on the technology that they use for the back office teams and how they coordinate their field work is going to be the most important thing to help them over the next year as they work through the challenges of meeting these new consumer and guest expectations. And that this is something not only from a technology perspective, but something they want to focus on for their business, because they understand the additional work that they'll be taking on, and the fact that being more efficient about it can really help them not only meet these guest expectations, but grow their business. I think this is sort of the critical piece of the puzzle that we've seen in a trend in the market that's just increasing, which is, look, on the marketing side, I need to leverage tools, and I have been for years and years, to optimize my listings, optimize my pricing, make sure that I'm actually getting the best placement that I can on on all the important channels. Make sure that my website is operating, with the optimized conversion rates that I really want to have. But now I'm thinking more and more about how do I differentiate my business by really delivering the type of guest experience that travelers demand, and then helping them understand that, communicating that to them, whether it's through WhatsApp or through SMS or through automated email messages. How do I communicate to the guests first? How do I communicate to the guests all the work that I'm doing? And then very importantly, and this is just a massive trend in the European market, very importantly, to the owners who have options for how they want to market their property. How do I make the owners feel and understand how much I care for their property and the work and the dedication that I'm putting into this? And that's an incredible challenge for property managers and agencies in Europe. It's also an amazing opportunity as that European market moves to more full service management, because it's just that much of a harder job for the individual owners. It is just an amazing opportunity for managers to dig in and understand how to effectively run their property operations programs. One last thing about us. We've been doing this for a while. This is just what we do. We think there's a need in the market for service optimization software, and we're working with a lot of folks to help them do it. We do it in parallel and in partnership with Guesty, which we love, and we think that's a great way for managers and hosts to gravitate and leverage the best tools for their job, so that they can use the best front office tools and they can use the best back office tools that can really unlock potential for their team. We went through this really quickly, but I wanted to make sure we save some time for a smart conversation about the future. And we're here to help. This is my email as well. Please feel free to reach out, and we'd love to chat with you.
Jeremy, please tell me that this house in the picture is yours, because that's going to be a great place to quarantine.
I wish. I really wish. We love this. We use this image of this property very often because I really think it's so prototypical of vacation rentals and sort of the outdoor space that you're talking about, an outdoor space to gather, a kitchen, and just, this is what it's all about. This is what that experience is all about.
Right. So let me maybe kick off and ask you a question, and then you can ask me back. But one thing that you show that is really interesting for me is the fact that a lot of the hosts are voluntarily, or the majority of the hosts are spacing now between the reservations, which basically means they're giving up occupancy at the time that they need occupancy and revenue the most, out of the understanding for the need for cleanliness and the importance of that for the guest. Do you think that's going to stay with us? Do you think that's going to be a new standard? How are you seeing that, surviving 2020 and on to the next few years?
I know, when Airbnb announced the 24-hour waiting or 72 waiting hour period in some cases, very controversial, I think. And there were a lot of folks who were on both sides of this trying to figure out what to do. I don't think this will be a trend that lasts. I think people will make adjustments and understand how they can staff up. What we saw that was really interesting from the survey results was that the majority of folks who did put in a gap and a waiting period and I thought this was great. The main reason they're doing it is to make sure their team has enough time to get the work done. And I think that was the smart decision. I personally, I think there was controversial evidence about, and now we've learned, right? In March, we didn't know. Everybody was, I mean, remember the days of, washing your, getting your groceries and wiping them down with Lysol and being concerned about whether or not the coronavirus was staying on cardboard boxes. I think we've learned over time that it's really this is an airborne transmission predominantly. Yes, you still have to wipe down surfaces, but like what you need is time to wipe down the property. And so we saw a lot of folks doing that. What are your thoughts? I think as you think about sort of throwing it back to you, this traveler persona, and I raised this because I think it's a common thread between what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Do you see, I guess maybe a more pointed, then you can open it up in your answer, but we saw this first wave. If people really didn't, we have clients all over the place and just like you, and people were just booking. They were booking online. People were worried about staffing up for reservations, but they weren't getting a lot of calls. Do you see that continuing, or do you think that's just the first wave of travelers who are like, I'm going to bring my own, I'll clean if it's not clean, I'll clean it myself. I just have to get out of here and I need some space. Is that going to continue or what do you think?
No, I think as you look, Jeremy, for the new normal, there will be some kind of standardization, right? So what we're seeing today is really that a lot of the people at the beginning, just as you said, really wanted to get out. There was no expectation. There was no playbook. Today, there is a playbook. And I think a lot of the guests, excuse me, are really looking for this kind of standardization and playbook. And I think some of the trends that we are seeing will definitely stick. I think the success of the short-term rental industry is really aligned with what's going to happen around, for example, working remotely. I think, if an employee came to an employer 3 months ago and said, I want to work from a different state, what do you think? That employer in many cases would say, I'm sorry, this open position is in this specific office. Today, any employer that will tell an employee you cannot work remotely from another state is very close-minded and probably was under a rock for 3 months. And if you can work from home, why not work from a vacation home? And so I think a lot of what we're seeing, things around extended stay, things around domestic travel, a lot of people have seen that they can find great places and great, beautiful places in nature within 2 hours of drive. And they don't really need to pack the entire family and pay for a flight and take a whole day of travel just to get to their destination. I think those things will stay. So the cityscapers, the nomads working remotely, those are things that will stay with us. I think we will see more people at the ages of 35 and 40 and 50 and 60 working remotely, as opposed to the digital nomads that were always those 20-somethings that went to Bali and worked from a resort there. And so I think all of those things will definitely stay with us. Of course, the idea of, like, for example, traveling healthcare providers, that's probably something that is going to slowly get reduced as we see the pandemic moving to a new normal stage. But a lot of this is here to stay, which is why I agree with you. I think people will understand that now the cleaning procedures are actually a differentiator that allows the short-term rental industry to present a better solution that is more modern and more suitable than hotels or any other form of travel.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see. Now's not the right time, right? You don't want staff coming in midway through your stay because you're trying to remain distant. But I think what we'll see is this trend. I just see this in one step of the progression on this quality and predictable trend, which is trying to get you closer and closer to a hotel. And mid-stay cleans are going to be a big deal. But not now, but in 2021, mid-stay cleans will be a big deal. What about what do you think about, as a lot of folks went through some very challenging times, both hosts and managers. This year, thankfully we've seen this recovery and we've got good positive data about what's happening next, but a lot of folks went through some really tough times.
Absolutely.
Furloughed employees brought some people back. Some folks, unfortunately, haven't been able to sort of weather what is a really severe storm. What do you think about consolidation in the market, given some of these challenges, not only in what's happened, But as you think about what happens next in 2021, you see consolidation happening. What's your view?
I think consolidation is inevitable. I think what we've seen is basically a situation, a market that broke every possible model. No property management company modeled a business in which they're going down to 30% occupancy at some point. And especially hosts that were in this, master lease agreement or carried a lot of commitment on their balance sheets really were hurt pretty severely. We have seen consolidation, and we have seen people who are also very bullish on the market and are looking for opportunities to pick up some of this inventory that others, left for them, and to try and cover for that. I think it's going to stay something that we are seeing. I think consistency is something that people are going to expect from vacation rental, from short-term rental. A lot of people that have come from hotels and are now moving to short-term rental properties expect to see some kind of consistent playbook, and Breezeway and other vendors are really helping hosts to do all of that. And I think that's something that we will see. And as a result, I do think that we'll see, the emerging of actual hospitality brands that are rooted in the short-term rental industry. But like every market, like after every financial crisis, I think there will be new people that are coming in and bringing innovation. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand out there. People want to travel, especially after months of not seeing the world and only looking at vacation photos from 2 years ago. People increasingly understand that they can get more for their money than a little room looking into the parking lot in a hotel, so they can pay less and get more. And so what I think is that the pie is actually going to become much, much larger, and players that will come and bring some innovative thoughts around how to actually leverage that will get a bigger piece of the pie. And so I guess it's a very long way to answer your question. Consolidation of existing players, yes, but also new innovative players that are coming into the market saying travel will forever be something in our soul that needs to happen. And there's a more innovative way to do that. And the place to do it is short-term rental, because this is where demand is going. At least this is my thinking.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, is really about the sentiment that you're seeing. We've definitely seen a lot of pessimism in March. Do you see some kind of optimism now in the market? Because again, we're seeing that. In all honesty, we're also fueling it because we're very bullish on the market. This is why we built a category leader in that space. But I wonder if that's something that resonates and you're seeing among your customers as well.
Oh, I think 100%. I think it's been a big challenge. Part of it was that in many cases, what we saw was our clients move from 0 to 60, and sometimes in a really unpredictable, not within their control, meaning they're at 0 and they're still facing restrictions. And then all of a sudden their market's open and there's just a flood of demand, and you need to be ready to go from 0 to 100% occupancy in 5 days. And, so I think there's been this whiplash in the market for a lot of clients and a lot of managers. But I think there's one thing that, people like you and I who are close to this business, I think for us, it was predictable in March and April that vacation rentals and home rentals would recover faster than hotels. It just seemed like it's so insanely obvious. And that's exactly what happened. And I think that is fueling correct optimism in the market that this is going to continue. This is a trend that will continue to happen. Vacation rentals, all those macro trends, drive to destination, trying to stay together, sort of bubbling up with your friends and still doing that sort of travel, trying to stay a little bit more socially distant and isolated, a flight to value, a lot of, outside of, there's also a major, global economic impact to this pandemic outside of health. So there's a flight to more economic solutions and options for travel. And vacation rentals just tick every one of those boxes. We saw this in 2008 when we were at Flipkey, and everyone was worried, what's going to happen. And actually, vacation rentals are fairly recession-proof. Folks still want to go on their vacation. They might change their plans and they might not jump on a plane, and instead they're going to drive. And we've seen this play out time and time again. So I'm incredibly bullish on the category. I'm also bullish on the expansion. I think it's amazing that, you still look at most vacation rental markets, and somewhere between 40 to 60% of the inventory in that market actually doesn't rent. They're still just second homes that are, they're on the sidelines. I think as this becomes more and more predictable, as people understand, as the owners understand the kind of service that they're going to get, the kind of predictable service that they can get, and some of the revenue they can make, you'll see more and more of that second home inventory coming in off the sidelines as well. So I think there's tons and tons of positive signal. And I think it's amazing listening to you talk about consolidation in your answer, and, true vacation rental travel brands sort of growing and more coming in, more people entering the market in the back. I couldn't agree more, but I think it's very fascinating when you think about how old this industry is, how long this industry has been around, that there's still such dynamic opportunity is really, really incredible. I share the sentiment.
The magic,
it's incredible.
The magic is the agility. I mean, you cannot quarantine for 14 days in a hotel, probably. You can definitely do it in a house in the mountains. If there is a shelter in place, your mom will not be very happy with you quarantining in like a hotel in the middle of Chicago or New York. But if you say, I'm going to take my family to the Catskills, that's totally working. And I think this agility, this ability to really adjust to the circumstances is a great weapon of the industry, and a great reason why this industry, I think, is going to do so much better. And if you're looking about, again, I think the evolution, those who were travel nomads before, who work remotely, are now, maybe settled down and got an apartment in Manhattan or in San Francisco. They're now breaking their lease and say, for the $5,000 that I pay for a 1-bedroom, I can rent a 8-bedroom house somewhere and have 7 of my friends with me for 2 months, and then change to a different location and go be next to a ski resort or next to the beach. And so I think what we're going to see now is the older generation doing the travel nomad thing and working remotely, and the younger generation really inventing the idea of flexible living, not just flexible rental, and put stuff in storage and start roaming and working at least for 2020 or 2021 from different vacation rental homes. And that's going to be very, very fascinating, and drive a whole lot of innovation also around furnishing and stays. And so I think we're down for a very interesting ride. So that's going to be very interesting. Life as a service, exactly.
We could talk about this forever, but which is great. I love this conversation. I know we're almost out of time, but it's really interesting, that sort of flexible living concept. And I'll just tease this concept for another talk that we'll do. But we talk about hospitality living as really the future of property management. Which is why vacation rental managers it's so exciting where they sit in the market. They sit at this perfect intersection between hospitality and property management. And they're really sitting at the future of how we all want to interact with our property. Yes, we want it to be this flexible concept, but we also want this hospitality level of living, this concierge level, which really puts a lot of emphasis on the service, the preparation of the property, and then the service once you're there. And I just see it is a massive, massive opportunity for folks who are in the vacation rental market, because that's where the ball is moving across the board, not just in travel, but how we want to live.
Completely agree. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I think that is only the beginning. We're probably going to have a lot more conversation like this every time you and I will be in different locations, because this is how we do 2020 now. But I'm looking forward to many more calls like this with everybody on the line as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much as well. And thank you for joining us on your vacation, even though you're vacationing anywhere, but thank you for joining us from Aruba. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you to the Breezeway team. Always great to be on the line with you guys.
Great.